Welcome to episode 4 of Mayday the Handmaid's Tale podcast. I'm joined by Tiana and Rhea.
Hey. Hi.
You gotta say hi to the people,
here.
acknowledge
Sorry.
them.
Hi, people.
They're here to listen to you.
Hi, people.
Hi, people. Jason is not with us today due to scheduling conflict. I'm not unconvinced that it's not because he's totally awkwardly weirded out by the show, especially after this episode with the doctor scene. I can only imagine that.
Even there are multiple scenes that while I was watching, I was like, oh, poor Jason.
Yes.
He's going to struggle with this one.
Yes. Well, hopefully we'll have Jason back next week. He told me it was because he was booked all weekend. We'll see if that's true. So we want to thank some people. We want to thank everybody who's been downloading the podcast. Things have been going very well. It's sort of weird having them out there now. Like, you know, when you do a thing and you work on it and then all of a sudden, like, it's out there for the people. It's strange. And so,
free in the world.
But it's doing well. We're getting positive reception. The social media has been going well. So thank you to everybody who's been listening to it. And always feel free to let us know what you think, as long as it's good. We have an interview with Lauren Hook of the Feminist Press this week that went really well. Rhea helped me out with that because I wanted some good questions because Rhea is more of an academic type person. And they are based out of City University of New York.
Yes.
I'm pronouncing that right and doing all that in order.
You are.
So that went really well. She was awesome. We talked about all kinds of stuff that they have going on and some new books and kind of the state of things and different feminist topics as they relate to the current reality. So that was nice. We will also have Hardcore Lady Quotes coming up later in the show. Everybody seems to really enjoy that feature. And so that will return and will be a weekly thing. So let's do a brief recap, kind of where we left off. With Offred. We know where we left off in the show. The last scene of the episode 3 was Ovglen in the hospital. And we know where that goes. We do not see any Ovglen this week. So we do not know what has become of her post-surgery. Mutilation is what we're calling it.
There's an NPR article this morning about terminology and female genital mutilation versus cutting with a woman who's in charge of, I think, a rehab clinic talking about the idea that mutilation is her preferred term, but then for some of her patients, because they don't want to feel mutilated, they use cuttings to not refer themselves as kind of undone. Or
that makes sense.
Which I hadn't even thought of. It was really interesting
that's
to me.
very interesting.
So different terminology for the victim versus the outside looking in, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Like how we don't refer to, victims generally as like damaged anymore.
Yeah,
and that used to be like a really commonly referred to thing.
Words matter, friends.
Words matter. That is correct. So, as far as Offred went, the last time we saw her, she had just revealed to Serena Joy that she was indeed not pregnant. And Serena Joy responded by throwing her in her room and telling her to stay there until she can come out, I guess. Which, when we open up the show this week, we learn has been 13 days, I believe. So that is where we picked up. But first, let's talk about those first 3, because I found this interesting. I did not know this until this week, that those 3 episodes were directed by the same woman. And so it kind of makes sense that they were all released kind of at the same time. They did have very much the same vibe about them. You could tell that they were all kind of going in the same direction and had the same general influence around them. The director's name was Reed Moreno. And she did this week, the reason I wanted to bring her up is because we talked last week about how it was the last scene at least, was very Kubrick-esque in its starkness and strangeness and just the overall feel of it. And there was an article this week about her, and she talked about how Kubrick was one of her influences. And so this is really the first, one of the first things that she's been a director of. And so I can't imagine she's going to get less work because of this, because those first 3 episodes were absolutely incredible. And the direction was fantastic. So kudos to her. So those 3 episodes kind of stand alone, and I looked to see what was coming up, and the next 2 are directed by the same person, and then 2 more after that, and I think it's 2 for everybody until the last episode, I believe. This week's was directed by a man named Mike Barker, so this is our first direction by a male, which is interesting. I wanted to see if you guys had any thoughts on that as women watching a show about this kind of stuff directed by a man and written by a man now.
Well, I like the purposefulness, I think, maybe of centering women, but also not making it only women, and the idea that men have important parts of the conversation to enter into, but let's put a woman first and then rotate. I'm assuming for the rest of the episodes it'll be not just men.
Yeah, I did not look to see the rest of them. I just looked for these
Something
two,
at some point said that they were being very conscious about trying to
Mix it up.
women's perspectives and then mix it up a little bit after
Okay.
that. So
Because we did have a definite vibe change for sure from the first 3 episodes to this one. This was very much more of a, I don't want to say traditional, but it was more of a slow burner as opposed to the first 3 episodes where you kind of got like a shock value out of almost all of those. That was not so much the case this time. It was very well done, and especially I would say the doctor's office scene was really well done, as creepy as it is. The way they shot it with behind the screen and the whole thing was, I thought, really cool. But yeah, definitely a tone change.
Yeah, I was not aware that it was a man directing this one as opposed to the first 3 that was a woman. So I kind of chalked up all of the tonal differences to where we're at in the story, and it felt much more... It reminded me of more of like The Americans. I don't know if anybody here watches that show.
I have not.
It's very like methodically paced and a slow burn, and it really felt a lot like that, where like there are a lot of things happening. You are getting a lot of information and a lot of like sub storylines going on. Like the doctor situation is kind of like its own like weird mindfuck situation, and like you're getting a lot of flashbacks to something that is slightly different than it was in the book, and you're just getting a lot of information, but it's at a relatively slow, measured pace, so it's kind of doled out evenly throughout the episode as opposed to the, like, quiet and super slams of shock that have been happening in the first 3, where it's more abrupt.
It's a good point that they were kind of tonally, the first 3, you kind of got these long periods, and then you got this BAM thing, so it was kind of like...
It was like a creeping sense of dread in the first 3, where, like, you have a lot of time to, like, think about what is happening and, like, dread what might be coming or what this might mean. And in episode 4 that we just saw, I feel like it was more, everything was so drenched with meaning and subtext that you were just like constantly thinking about it.
I wonder if that had to do tonally with where we're at in the show. Like, she's been in this room for 13 days, so it's just this long period of time. So, and you know, for her, it's kind of this period of time where you just kind of...
That's true.
Everything's methodical.
I hadn't thought about that. But maybe that's what she's thinking. And I think part of it is she's in this place where she's trying to decide how much of a rebel she wants to be. And you get a much stronger sense in the show that she has a history of being more of an activist or more outspoken or more inclined to go against the grain. Not as much as Moira. But that scene... We get her trying to escape in a way that she did not in the book. In the book, I think she's much more hesitant. And in the show, I think we have this figure of this woman who is showing us what it means to process what kind of a person do you want to be. Do you want to go against the grain, or do you want to just make things easy for yourself?
Well, I got a little bit of the opposite vibe as far as she's always been a rebel. Only because, and this might just be the situation she was in, because like when she's in the bathroom scene where Moira has the shiv, I guess is it a shiv? Anyway... They've created the knife-like device out of the thing that got off the toilet. And June is telling her, don't do that, you know, and all this stuff. So she seemed to me at that point like more of a, let's not get caught, let's not get in trouble.
Let's not lose a hand.
But I think she's like a follower activist, right? Like she's still willing to go along with it. She's still friends with Moira. She still goes on that escape route. So you're right. Moira is clearly like the most rebellious.
Right.
But she doesn't say like, well, we're not friends anymore if you keep doing this kind of stuff because I'm a true believer and I'm going to go back and... telling you or
I think her perspective at that point in the story seems much more like probably most women would be like, this is totally fucked up, I want to get out of here, but like I'm not willing to risk losing my hand just to carve something on a bathroom stall wall. Like that doesn't seem important enough to risk.
Well, and how does that, do you think, reflect on sort of this, especially today in the current political climate? We have all these marches and all these protests that there's very little consequence for, per se. So what does that say about kind of a reflection on today's society where you have all these people who are protesting all these things, but would they still be out there protesting as hard or as loud if there were guys with machine guns mowing them down, or there was, you were going to get your hand cut off? I think that was kind of interesting to think about just from a modern day, our current time perspective.
Yeah, in relation to that, in modern day perspective, I think like a lot of women are willing to go out and march, but they're less willing to speak up publicly in front of your coworkers when you see something happening that's unacceptable at work, because like that'll have direct ramifications on your life and your career. And, you know, say something in public when you see something inappropriate happening, or stand up to somebody in your life who is kind of abusive. I think a lot of people, not just women, are just way less willing to do something when they know it's going to have negative consequences in their own lives. But, like, marching makes you feel good and makes you feel like you're taking a stand, even though it essentially achieves not a lot.
And there's a privilege element there, too, right? There are things that I can do and risks that I can take as a white woman that women of color cannot, because the consequences with that for them would be so much more severe than they would be for me. And so I think about for June, she's kind of stuck in that balance and wondering, how much do I want to use that and how much do I not, right? How much am I willing to risk and how much am I not? And that seems to be a lot of where we are now. And if you look at the marches where there were severe consequences, where people were arrested or beaten or maced or all those things, you see a lot more people of color than you do white people. So there's a racial element that I wish the show had decided to tackle, but I understand that maybe they didn't want to take on so much at one time. But I think that I read somewhere that it's unrealistic that a society like this would be as racially, I guess, unconscious as they're trying to be. That if they were, you know, male supremacists, they probably also would have been white supremacists, and you wouldn't have seen that kind of unmentioning of race that we see so far.
Yeah, I think they definitely have gone with the theory that, like, fertility trumps everything in the show, which is totally not what happened in the book. And I think I'm grateful for that, in that, like, I'm not distracted by the lack of minorities, because I think that would have been super visually weird to see. But it also does make you think, like, that seems a little crazier. It seems less likely that they would only hate or only try to oppress one subset of people instead of many subsets that don't fit into their, like, perfect ideal.
I think what I was reading, I'm trying to think if it was Margaret Atwood that said it, or I think it was, because it was one of those articles talking about the difference between the show and the book, was that between 1985 and now, when she wrote the book, that society has been so much more integrated with, you know, interracial marriages and all that stuff, that it would have been almost impossible for them to weed that out, so it almost wouldn't be worth it. You just, you know, if they're going to oppress people, just take what you have and just do it. So I think that's probably why that creatively was made.
Although I have noticed they haven't, when you're seeing the powerful men so far, you only see little glimpses of a group of powerful men. They are all white dudes.
And the wives were all white, right?
All of the wives we've seen so far have been white.
I will say that when this opening shot of the doctor's office scene, when they're in the waiting room and they have the pictures of the wives and the commanders up on the wall at the hospital, there are several African American.
Oh yeah.
There's also, I'll talk about. There's also one woman who doesn't have a man with her in a picture, like in the bottom row,
crazy.
just a single wife holding the baby. Which I was like, can you do that? Yeah. I don't know, because I don't know the rules.
I would think that she would immediately be given to another man in this society.
And I didn't get my Gilead handbook, so I have no idea.
It's in the mail.
You know, if that's a thing or not. So I thought that was interesting. But okay, let's do a deep dive into the various things that we did see in episode 4. So we open up and we got a flashback scene with the carnival. That was really sad to me. Like, I don't know why this one got me more than anything, just because I think everybody's been there and you remember that, like, either you were a kid and went with your parents, or you have a kid and you went with that. And it's like, a carnival is like the most chaotic, you know, free event that you probably, one of those that you participate, because it's just kind of all about pleasure and all about, you know, doing whatever you want, eating ridiculous food and just everything, right?
Everything on a stick.
And so she's in the room, has been now for 13 days, and is just having this flashback. It was really just sad. And it was just like a really downer way to start this episode. So she's been in there for 13 days. The door is unlocked, which she makes a mention of, which she says, I think, shows you who is really in control, because she can't leave, even if she wanted to. When she has the ability to run, there's nowhere for her to go.
It's a prison without bars.
Correct. So she starts wandering around the room. This is when she goes to the closet and finds the words scrawled in Latin down on the bottom of the floor, which is Nolite Te Bastardes Carborundorum. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And she talks about a previous Offred, and that there's someone who was there before me.
I remember thinking about almost, like a Rebecca parallel, the novel Rebecca, where she's haunted. She's living in this, it's a gothic novel, and she's living with her new husband. You never find out this woman's name. You only know that she knows that there was a Mrs., what is it? I don't remember the name now. A Mrs. So-and-so before her, and she can never live up to that standard. And so she's just haunted by this woman whose ghost is with her, not in kind of corporeal sense, but the idea that you will come after someone who will set the tone for what you are and who you can be. And I think she's trying to come to terms with that, really thinking about the suicide, but then also knowing that this woman has left some kind of legacy for her.
So we do get another flashback, and this is the bathroom scene that we... What?
Before that, you go right from that scene, I think, to where the commander and Serena Joy are talking. Is that later?
That's later.
Oh, okay.
It's after the flashback. They do a flashback to the bathroom scene where they are...
Oh, yeah.
Moira has fashioned the shiv out of the toilet rod from inside the toilet tank. I know if you've read the book, you know that no, you were saying, because I didn't remember, that it was slightly different in the book.
It's just Moira in the book. And you don't get a sense either way that she's trying to talk her out of it or into it. You just hear, here's what Moira tried to do, and she fails the first time.
She didn't know. You learn in the book that Offred only knows this third hand. She heard it from somebody that this is what happened to Moira because she just showed up one day in the Red Center. Like, she woke up one day and, like, Moira was no longer there.
But the first attempt, Moira came back.
Yes,
the first attempt was failed.
The first attempt, I think the feet thing happened to Moira, right?
Yeah. Rhea mentioned that earlier, and I couldn't remember because it's been a little bit since I read it. So we get back to the closet, at which I think this is the last scene before we do see Serena Joy and the commander, and she just thanks the previous Offred for writing that down, that you must have been very brave to do this, because even scrawling words in a closet on the floor is forbidden.
Yeah, like, where did she get something to do that with? It was
exactly.
Crazy.
So we go back to Serena Joy and the commander, and this is kind of the first long interaction we see with them in the show, which is kind of nice. As much as you want to hate Serena Joy, and we probably still will hate Serena Joy overall because she's mostly terrible.
She hasn't been called Serena Joy yet,
no, she's
right?
not been called anything yet.
Yeah, just Mrs. Waterford.
Mrs. Waterford.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of looking forward to that when we get to the Serena Joy backstory to see which direction they take.
I don't know if they're going to have it. She's so young. I don't know how they would make it work.
Got to be something, because you can tell that she's got a...
I was thinking about that a lot in this scene. So in the book, for listeners, I don't know if we covered this before, Serena Joy, the character of Mrs. Waterford, was kind of... It sounds like she was kind of like a television preacher's wife kind of before, and she was very eccentric and, like, you know, drenched in heavy cake makeup all the time.
Baker,
very Tammy Faye Baker. And she was really a big proponent of women staying at home and doing the home things. And she was sacrificing herself by, like, going around and being famous and talking to all these people about how women should be at home. Like, I'm not able to do this because I have to be here.
Very Phyllis Schlafly-esque.
Very much. And it's a big point in the book when they say she must have been so shocked when they took her at her word.
That's my favorite line in the whole book. I love
it. That really hit home to me in this scene, in this episode, where she sounds, because the commander is talking about... She just asked, like, a how's it going kind of conversation, because he's working on a laptop.
Yes, we didn't talk about that. Was my first note. Was that we talked about the ear tags and tracking them, and did they have technology? And I was like, well, I have to imagine that at least they do, the commanders. And so it was nice to see that he's got the laptop with the internet and the whole deal. So
it was very jarring.
Yeah.
But so he is talking a little bit about the EU and an embargo, which you have to assume it's Gilead being embargoed.
Right.
And they're talking about the euro and the European Union, and it was just very today and very prescient. I was like, whoa, oh god, yeah, this is supposed to be like very near future to now. I forgot. And Serena Joy makes a comment and asks a question where she sounds very intelligent and with it and, like, engaged and plugged into what is happening in the world.
Right.
And she made, I can't remember exactly what she said. She asked a very intelligent question, and he shut it down so fast.
Well,
he was like, we've got great men working on this. And she just...
And that word specifically, we've got, I think it's now, we have great people on that. We've got great men on that.
Yeah.
So it's just funny because
she's not allowed to read either.
News.
That's true. And so he was just like, oh, you know, all the terrible things and everything in the worst light. And you're thinking, what good light is there?
Yeah,
and
what is the good light?
You just got to think you're in this situation where when you're involved in that, and it's... Rhea and I had a conversation the other day where we were talking about various religions and how, from the outside looking in, sometimes people think that all in one religion... Like, if you're talking about Islam, I think people, if they don't think about it long or hard enough, get this impression that all of Islam is the same, or all the Catholics are the same. And if you have been, we were talking about being Baptist and being raised in a Baptist church, you know to a great degree that there are your hardcore people, and then as you work out from that circle, it gets less and less, different. And it's all different.
Or even not less and less, but just different, right? When you look at Orthodox Jews or Reform Jews, there's a big movement in the Reform movement to say we're not less Jewish, right? We're just differently Jewish than we are.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You can see her wheels kind of start spinning, and that's the first point where she actually tries to kind of interject and do something as a woman in this society, and she's like, well, we need to do this, and we need to smear her, and talking bad about her so that they discredit her.
She says the thing that you do is you don't even acknowledge the content of what you said. You attack her. And then you start to think that's how they did it, right? Is they started to malign people and made people less than human rather than saying, oh, you're right, we should consider what are human rights and the actual ideas behind their message.
Yeah, I thought that was fascinating too, because that is what happens in politics today.
That is exactly
how the game is played. You go after the individual and discredit them. I mean, we see this everywhere in our society right now. It happens online when people are just having a very public fight. We see this in courtrooms. That's what you do. You discredit the witness.
My impression of the commander, too, is that he really sees himself as a part of a subset of this society that doesn't need the same kind of regulations that the rest does. And that's why I think he can have this cognitive dissonance of breaking the rules and creating the rules at the same time.
As if the rules are not for him.
Yes, those people need that because they don't have the brain power that I do. And they don't have the self-control that I do. And if everybody did what I did, it would be mass chaos. But I know that I can do it and still have the power to get up in the morning and, be a productive human being. So we have to take that option away from them. But it's okay if I do it because I know that it all.
And you see that's kind of your people in power story where it's,
very
I can do that because I know how to do it. And
very much, yeah.
And that's very much how it is in this story too, which we'll see later on when they get to the party, which is going to happen at some point. The next thing we get is the Martha brings breakfast up to Offred, and she's passed out on the floor. So then they decide that they're going to send her to the doctor because tonight is ceremony night. And we got to have things prepped, and as the doctor would say, in fighting shape for ceremony night, which I thought was a fantastic choice of words and terrible. So there is a part before they leave where the Martha comes in and tells Serena Joy, and she's like, "Oh, what did she do this time?" Which just goes back to this parent-child thing because she talks to her, and every time they interact or every time that she's mentioned, it's such this disdain or like a disappointed mother. And like, "Oh, what did she do now?" And so they finally do decide to send her. And the commander actually sounds like, what happened to her? Like he's like very concerned.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, especially happening so closely after the situation in which we see him totally shutting down her having an opinion on world events. This is apparently a situation where she has all the power. I definitely got the impression that like the commander does not get say over really what happens to the handmaid. Like he can control his wife, but he is not supposed to be directly controlling the handmaid because he's supposed to be uninvolved in that, I think, relationship. They're
not supposed to see each other.
The only way that they have relationship is for the ceremony, and then that is it. He is completely uninvolved in like the running of the house, which would include managing the handmaid. And so it made me think like, is she extra, especially right in this moment, extra angry? Because she just...
Her one power has been kind of overridden by his...
Well, yeah, and she had, she had thoughts and ideas and was just completely shut down. Like, is she still kind of reeling from that? And so she's taking it out on Offred's situation.
There's a line in the book, and I think it's at the conference at the end, but I can't remember, about if very little power is available, then people will grab whatever they can, or something like that. And that's what I think about Serena Joy, right? That if her only power is to control Offred, and she's just... That's what slammed her in the face with this getting shut down by the commander, that then she's more likely to grab as much as she can in other ways.
Yeah, and no wonder. I mean, she is also in a cage. It is just a prettier cage. She is just as trapped as the handmaid.
A gilded cage. Nice. Moving on to the doctor's visit. And so we get a little interaction with Nick because Nick has the driver. And I thought one of the interesting things that they made a point of showing was Serena Joy rolling up the partition. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of gives you in the back of your head, is like, does she know that something is going on, that Nick is not really on the level of being all in for the cause of Gilead. And that,
is he?
But we don't know.
We
right?
don't
There's so
know.
many things you don't know.
I was curious there too about the red curtains in the car, and if that's like maybe the curtains are blue when Serena Joy is in the car, or
Ooh, I never thought about
Weren't
that.
the curtains red in the van?
marker.
They were, but
In
this
the
isn't the
birth
van.
mobile?
This is
No, I know
their
it's the car, but I'm
So it would only ever be
it
the
would be only
handmaids
their car.
there.
Yeah, I don't know.
So something I want to watch out for in the future to see. if that
The
comes
coloring
in.
is the symbolism of the coloring is interesting. Now we're flashing back to the Red Center, where they're learning about the ceremony. I love this scene because it was completely freaking weird, and it's just interesting because you never knew like at what point did they learn about it and how did that process go. So it was interesting to see their take on that. So we get a little interaction between Moira and Aunt Lydia because it finally clicks with Moira that we're going to be having sex with the commanders too, because at this point none of them really knew what are we even doing. Like and in the bathroom they talk about the turkey baster with the old man jizz.
Yeah, and that sounds like if we were imagining, being in their shoes, you have no idea what's coming. That does seem like the logical way to go.
Most expedient.
Yes, the most effective with the least amount of chance for error, I guess.
So they kind of get into the positions. Moira asks that question, and Aunt Lydia, you can tell, I couldn't tell if she was just annoyed by the question being asked or if she referred to it as intercourse, if that was a banned word, because I don't know.
It seemed like Moira was really making an effort to ask a question in a way that she would get an answer rather than provoke the aunts from punishing her or something. Like she really just wanted to know.
Yeah.
But Lydia's just waiting for the snark to come back or something.
Yeah.
And she does give her that little kick with the foot because her foot's hanging off the bed. So kind of maintaining her, power, strength position. So they are like, one thing that caught me was when they were going through the positioning and they said holding the wrists. And it just kind of like made me really like sick-ish. Like to think about the fact that why are they holding their wrists? Is it because if they try and fight back that they can't go anywhere?
And also probably to make it like the opposite of romance.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, the way they do it is the opposite of romance.
Yeah, but I mean, it's definitely in the wives' interest to make sure that this is as like sterile an experience as possible.
And yet to connect so that they feel like they have some kind of physical connection with whatever's happening.
Yeah, like the fake birthing.
Yeah, the fake birthing. Yeah. So this goes right into that where they're like, they're there and they're kind of in the same position, but they're not really in the same position of that. And they tell the Rachel and Jacob story after Moira asks, because that's kind of how they relate back, because it is the Rachel and Leah Center.
Yeah.
Is what the Red Center is called, and I believe Leah was the handmaid.
No, Beth was the handmaid.
Oh, that's right.
So Rachel and Leah are both wives of Jacob, but Rachel was the one who couldn't get pregnant.
Gotcha.
Yeah, did you notice that in that scene, in the flashback to the Red Center, the woman whose hands June needed to hold, like, she was missing half a finger.
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. I was like, and that just made me think, like, oh, God, how common is the mutilation of the other parts of their body? That seems like such a...
Well, it's... and
it was healed. It had been a while.
They do not seem to hold back.
I think it was her middle finger, so I was immediately like, what could she have done to lose just half of one finger? Did she, like, flip one of the aunts the bird or something? I don't know.
And I did like the other... They kind of throw in some different personalities with the handmaids, like the one girl that's, like, chewing on her fingernails, and Aunt Lydia's like, get your hands out of your mouth, and losing it, and... Yeah, you can tell that
it makes them seem like normal people.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool that they did that instead of kind of not giving them a personality, which is kind of easy to do in a scene like that.
Yeah, and you don't get personality of the other handmaids in the book. Because
that's true, because
you're
it's all
only
in
Offred's head, so like you know Offred very well, and you know some of Moira, but not to this extent.
And then great Aunt Lydia line with, that is his word, dear, and we shall abide. And you're just like, ugh.
Creepy.
So we get to the doctor's office. First thing I noticed, as we talked about earlier, was the... pictures of the commanders and their wives and the kids, but that I did notice because I was looking for it, that there was some people of color, African American guy for sure with a wife, and then the one random single wife, which really threw me off. So I would be really interested to see if that's ever addressed again, or if that was like an Easter egg where it's like a nod to somebody produced on the show, like single person with a baby. I don't know.
Do we ever get DVDs of Hulu shows? Like, when do we get the?
It's a good question. I don't know if they do or not.
That seems like the opposite of what Hulu would do.
I
like
know, but
they do have some behind the scenes
collector's
extra
edition.
stuff.
Turn on the comments while you watch the episode.
Yeah, if you look on the channel, they do have underneath, like where the episodes are, they have some extra feature stuff. So I don't know if they'll address that, like as the episodes go. They'll put some.
I would really love to hear about that.
Yeah, I just thought that caught me off guard. I just noticed that today watching it for the second time. I didn't notice the single woman, and I was like, that's very strange. So that'll be interesting to see if they ever come back to that again. So doctor's office scene is probably, direction-wise, I think my favorite scene of the whole thing. Just the way they did it. And stupid me, because this is not a doctor I go to. And I don't think this is how... I've been there, because I've had a kid, and... Well, I didn't have a kid. My wife had the kid, and so I had to go to the doctor with her. No screen involved. I think the screen is an invention of Gilead.
It is, yeah.
Right?
That's not normal.
And it took me a while, like, until he peeked his head around, I didn't realize that the screen was in between him and, like, at her, waist.
So he can't
see her and that they can't really see each other. And I was like, oh, because I just thought it was kind of, like, we were behind both of them, way far back in the room. And so when he peeks his head around, I was like, oh, it's like right...
It's a partition.
Okay, it's a partition. I did know who the guy was the moment he walked in the room and started talking.
Oh, yeah. He's got a very distinctive voice. For anybody that watches Orphan Black,
yes.
He is an awesome character in Orphan
He
Black
is
that, like, at
fantastic.
first you kind of loathe, but you grow to love.
You ever watch that show?
No.
Oh, that is a
Ray,
tremendous
you gotta
show. We
see
watched
Orphan
that
Black.
show.
It's so
my wife watches
good.
that show, and it's fantastic. And his character... So, for those of you that don't know about Orphan Black, very briefly, there is a lot of clones of this one woman. And so... There's a government program where they were created, and now something's screwed up, and now they're trying to kill all the clones. There's various... This woman, the same actress, plays all these characters. But she plays every version of this clone. And the one that this guy is the husband for is like this typical, like, suburban...
Not typical.
Well, not in the end, but when you're first
extreme.
Introduced to her, she's a very extreme version of like a suburban housewife mom with the two kids, soccer mom, doing stuff for the PTA.
But so, times a million.
Yes, so like that on steroids. That is her character, and that's the role
Speed.
she plays.
I think it would be Speed, not steroids, for sure.
Okay. So this guy is her husband, and he's great because they get into all these ridiculous situations.
Violent.
And he plays it like straight, and he's like the doting husband who's like, and she's very much in charge. You can tell that she is the suburban housewife that runs the show. And so when I saw him walk in, I was like, oh, he's going to be great at this. And so he peeks his head around. I was like, yes, I knew that's who it was. So
it was great to see him, but I was also like, oh, damn, I wish he were a bigger character. Because
well,
he's
you know what
great.
I mean? I think in the book, spoiler alert, major spoiler alert here, the doctor gets caught and killed, right?
I think so.
I do believe that.
Because it's suggested that he was the father of Warren's.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. See, I don't remember that. I do remember that he got caught, and because he, in this scene, is asking her, like, it comes in talking about his tomatoes, like a normal doctor's visit, like where they just talk about, everyday kind of crap and try and, talk to you, and you're just like, really?
That was also pretty jarring as a reminder of, like, how normal life could be for men.
Yes.
Well, that's a good point.
I just kind of forgot that, like, men could be leading basically normal lives in this world because, we only see the commander and in very limited situations, and Nick, who is, like, not an important man in the society, so, like, he has a relatively limited life as well. But, like, this doctor, like, he grows tomatoes in his spare time in his garden. Like, that is something we do right now.
And when I think the actress who plays Janine said something about the human rights issue, and it's not feminist because it's human rights, and she said there were men on the wall. Well, but then when you look at the rest of society, you see the doctor wearing scrubs, but that's appropriate to his job. And the commander wears a uniform that he wears a suit. That is appropriate to his job. But we don't think that they have to wear the same one, or that there's
it's not
same
required of them necessarily.
Right, or that I don't picture the doctors going around town in their scrubs. They probably
change
into street
It's not
clothes,
the same as the women.
So you do see, that even though the men still have serious controls and restrictions around what they can do, it's not the same intensity as I think the women.
No.
Yeah, they're very limited in scope, but it seems like less personal limitations.
Yeah.
It's just limitations in, like, societal roles.
Yeah.
So he does the one line is, he asks her, I forget what he asked previous to this statement, but he said, you can talk to me. Like,
he asks how they're treating her.
And he's like, you can talk to me. And you're like, I think going back to a Star Wars reference from earlier, you got Admiral Akbar popping up your head going, it's a trap! And so everybody's just thinking, okay, is he really for real? Is he a spy for the eye? So nobody, again, it's a whole, who do you trust? You can't trust anybody. And again, going back to what you said is about how rebellious do you want to try and be versus the consequences that could happen. And she really chooses not to at this point because she, is fresh off a 13-day, solitary confinement, more or less.
Yeah.
And I guess mentally that drains you. I mean, I wouldn't know, but you got to think that would drain you. And so at this point, you're probably like, I just don't even have it in me to, like, try at this point to try and
be subversive.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting there is that she's in solitary confinement for not being pregnant, right? Like, that's the entire thing that she did was to not be pregnant by a man who we learn probably is sterile, because probably all these guys are, according to the doctor. So then you think, you can't be in the right kind of frame of mind laying in this room, this, sterile white room, and think logically, well, maybe if I would just get pregnant, then I could move around.
Right.
And
even if she did think about that, is it worth the risk that he is an eye?
Yeah.
You never know.
And there's an eye out in the other room.
It sounds like a trap.
Yeah, your nurses have been replaced by armed guards. Do you know what to do? Yeah, I got this. I'm good. Thanks. Please get out of here with the machine gun.
God, could you imagine if some woman walked in and didn't know what to do? She had never been to the OBGYN before, and that is the person that has to explain to her, like, this is how undressed you need to be. This is where you get up.
So, a couple things happen in this scene. He talks to her, trying to get her to talk to him. He says that he can help her later on, which means it maybe means, you don't know, but maybe means that he wants to help her get pregnant, because if they don't, saying that Waterford is sterile.
I think even if you haven't read the book, you know.
But know what?
That's what he's referring
to.
to.
But in my head, being a guy, and just kind of think of it from a creepy guy standpoint, is he saying that to just try and have sex with her right now?
Well, yeah,
or is he saying that to really try and help her?
Yeah, fair point.
Is it just creepy dude doctor that wants to have sex with this lady? And
both.
And I thought,
it probably is both.
Yeah, I thought a lot about that too, but I also thought, like, this would be a prime situation where, like, he could rape her and there's nothing she could do about it.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
she would take the blame if they were caught. So, if he was just trying to have sex, like, I would think that
he would just do it?
Yeah, he would just do it.
Well, and then the other thing, and this is really terrible to think about, but then I was like, he checked her out, did the whole deal, and I was like, did he even really need to do that?
I think he...
Or was that just, again, creepy dude thing, like, I can do this, so I'm gonna do it?
Yeah, I think he was just checking to make sure,
because,
I know what he said. They're already there.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But did he really have to? Or was he just doing it because
Serena Joy was expecting him to have.
Yeah, but you can say, he checked, without him actually having to check.
That just came out. There was some U.S. gymnastics news this week, I guess.
There's a lot of U.S. gymnastics news that is.
But the women of the 2000 Olympics team, I think their trainer, one of their doctors, had been penetrating them without permission. Because once you get a vulnerable young woman, right, and you can take those liberties, and who will believe you if you say, my doctor did this to me? So another parallel of.
Well, especially when you're in that situation, you're on the U.S. Olympic team, which is like probably the thing that you've worked harder for, and the hardest for in your entire life is where you want to be. And again, rebellion versus ramifications.
Cost benefit.
As terrible as that is, and how awful that is for some man to take advantage of that situation and that mindset of some girl who's probably like between 12 and 14 at the earliest, at the latest, since they're coming into that. That's just awful.
Yeah.
We end that with her basically saying that she's not going to do anything with him, and he picks up his stuff and pretty much leaves.
And she can't offend
looking
him.
Slightly disappointed, I might add. Which also lended my credibility to he's kind of creepy dude. We get the limo ride back, which is another flashback back to briefly to the carnival scene, and then she just loses it in the limousine and just starts cursing and banging on the partition. And Nick is kind of he doesn't really make a move. He kind of looks back, but there's nothing really he can do.
Yeah,
he can't stop.
He can take the long way home.
Exactly.
So that she has more time. And
so when they do get back, he does like this total dude, like, I'm sorry. And she's like, you're sorry for what? What do you want to happen here? What do you want to do? He's like, I wish I could, change your situation or doing something, he says. And she just like totally is like, get out of my face, because there's nothing you can do. And you're just another man right now, especially in this show that is like trying to maybe help me. Do I trust you? It's all bad. And she, at this point, you can tell that having been through 13 days of solitary, going to the doctor who just tried to maybe help her,
and
she
going
doesn't
back
know.
To solitary, she is being driven back to confinement, extreme
confinement. So now she's back there, and Serena Joy, she tries to apologize, like she goes through this like whole like very little kid-esque thing again of, I know I was bad and I'm sorry and it's all my fault. And you can tell she's like, at this point, she's just desperate not to have to go back to that room.
What are the magic words I can say?
But Serena Joy is having none of it, even though you do see her that little acknowledgement where she stops doing the cross stitch and kind of acknowledges that she's kind of either broken her or is kind of getting to her because she's apologizing to her and, giving her a little bit of that power. So then we flash back to the escape scene. And that the way they set it up is pretty much exactly like in the book. They take off the aunt's outfit so that Moira can do it and put her, basically tie her to the pipe downstairs. Which also
solved another problem I had with the book, where I read that scene in the book thinking, like, there is no way she would be able to do that by herself. Like,
yeah,
there's
that's
no
true.
way.
That's true.
Get another adult to take off all her clothes under threat, and then you have to put down your weapon to completely change your clothes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's true. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point.
It seemed unlikely.
So
not that any of this seems not that most of the actual situations in this book seem super likely.
So that part of the escape scene, we just get to where they leave. And that's kind of where it stops. We go back, and it's ceremony time. And Fred comes in early. Hey, Mr. Waterford, how you doing? Man. She's like kneeling on a pillow, like you do, I guess, pre-ceremony.
Yeah.
And she talks about
there's a lot of kneeling on the pillows for the handmaids, apparently.
So he comes in early and is trying to talk to her and says, hey, we should have our rematch.
Person.
And like, how you been? And
she's like, I'm going to get punched in the face if you don't leave.
And again, she's like, he can't be here. And again, she can't talk to him. Like, that's the big thing later is that she said I couldn't respond to him.
She couldn't even be caught, like, looking at him.
Right. And so he leaves. Serena, people start coming in. He's not even supposed to be there until the end.
He doesn't leave. He just, like, walks over
out
to the mantle.
Yeah. And again, he's the man, so what consequences are there really for him? None. And so then we do have awkward ceremony, or he comes in.
Before they get to the actual awkward ceremony, Serena seems suspicious.
Oh, she makes that comment about you're never early.
Yeah, she says, who's the early bird today? And, like, when she sits down, I don't know what it is. Again, amazing silent acting from everybody in this show, doing a great job. But her face is just saying so much about, like, why are you really early? Like, this is so strange.
And really, that's her worst fear, right?
Really suspicious about what's going on. Yeah, it's gotta be.
That, that I'm not only am I shut out because I can't produce the child, but I'm gonna get shut out because my husband's gonna have a thing with the handmaid.
Right. Like, what would happen to her? Could she be replaced? I don't understand. Like, what would happen to a wife in that situation? Yeah. It's got to be terrifying.
Yeah, we don't know what the rules are in Gilead yet. So, yeah, we have don't worry about it. It happens to all the guys moment with Fred trying to I did have a thought right before this started. I was like, well, he has to get an erection for this whole thing to happen. How does that happen? Because unless there's some pre-show entertainment in the other room, which I don't think is allowed in Gilead, there's somebody. This has got to happen somehow, and so then you try to kind of see the leading up to it, where he's like trying to work it out himself, more or less.
Yeah. Like, if there was really a society turned over where, like, men were completely dominating everything and all women were in subservient dictated roles, there would totally still be porn everywhere. Yes. There is no way he would not have a special porn room attached to the bedroom.
Well, and knowing what happens later. Knowing what happens later with the party that they go to and, like, the secret stuff that goes on there, you're probably right.
There's definitely porn in this world. Yeah. If there is still internet and men are in charge of everything, there is porn.
Yeah.
Good
point. And he pulls out magazines in the book, too, to give her, like, ooh, do you want to look at this really old Newsweek? And she's like,
yes. About that. And it's like...
You think at least have, like, a Sears catalog or something.
Newsweek is, like, the naughtiest thing ever.
He leaves the room. Serena Joy goes in there, and they kind of have this moment of... She asks, can I help you? And it's kind of the first kind of intimate moment they have together, where you can tell that she's kind of missing this, and they're both kind of missing that intimacy. And so she does try and help him, but he stops her, and then he leaves and goes somewhere else. Yeah. And then she goes back in the room and tells
Boots
offer it out and says it's over. So that was super awkward and fun.
Yeah, that situation was definitely like who is this the worst for? It's gotta be
another
Serena.
Jason,
Yeah, it's just awkward for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's gotta be the worst for Serena for sure.
So then we flash back to this train scene, which kind of gives us our first post-Gilead takeover view of the city as they're walking through it. People are taking bodies away,
and
they come up on
how shocked they were.
Yeah,
it must have been so much must have changed while they were in the Red Center.
Right, and you don't know how long they were in the Red Center. They don't really give you a
there are no
Red
street
Center
signs or
outline. Because when they walk out, they're like, "Where are we?"
Yeah.
And really, you think it could have been as little as like a month because
I was really struggling with that. Has it been a long time and that's why they're shocked? Or are they shocked because it's been so fast?
Yeah.
I think they're shocked just because when they walk out, it's so starkly different than...
The buildings look weird with no signage on them.
Right,
like, it seems like a military-industrial complex, but like you're clearly in the middle of an urban area.
Right, and Moira makes a point of like, where are the street signs? Where are we? Like, they can't even... Like, it's their city.
Yeah.
They
so disorienting.
Well, they think it's their city. Like, they do make a point of saying that, like, they couldn't have taken us very far, I think, is what she says. But anyway, they're walking through the city, trying not to get caught because Moira is dressed up like the ant. And there's the men hanging from what I think is it's either like a water tower structure or a stadium. It's round. And so in between all the slots as a person, you would think they're all men, hanging. And there's bodies being taken away. We see the burning of the art and various papers of some sort.
Yeah.
Probably anything non-religious.
Very Berlin, like
affiliated. Yes, very.
I think that was a fountain that they were using as a giant
giant fire pit.
It was just really bizarre.
Yeah, so basically probably burning anything that doesn't fit the standards of Gilead and burning all the art and anything that, could be subversive or lead to free thought.
Can you imagine how long it would take to get rid of all of the materials they disagreed with? I mean, that's intense. That's like the contents of the vast majority of homes, every store that is not absolutely necessary.
The Fahrenheit 451 tie-in.
It's like Fahrenheit 451.
Even you look nowadays, if you look at like the Taliban and ISIS, that's what they do when they roll into places.
Yeah, but they're rolling into places that are not like dense urban areas.
Right?
America.
No, the ISIS, they're rolling into cities and like pretty much rounding up everybody and then
destroying
the house.
That's true,
but
they just blow up the buildings. It's not the same.
Not the printed material.
But I remember like one of the first things when I think it was
in Syria, they're just destroying the cities.
Pre 9/11, I think, when we first started hearing a lot of Taliban stuff going on in Afghanistan, they were destroying these large like Buddhist statues that were however many a lot of years old, and so that was one of the things that I thought about was just this stuff has happened. And Margaret Atwood did say, there's nothing in this book that hasn't happened. Moira is trying to figure out which train do we go on because you don't want to go to the wrong train. We want to go to the train to Boston to GTFO. So Moira ends up getting on the train because Offred kind of gives her this look like, you have this opportunity, go. I can't believe you're going to go without me. It kind of sucks. But she's like, I'm glad you're leaving. She had that look on her face like, I'm glad you're getting out of here. Someone is. And they take her back. And at that point, we go back to the room. And she kind of, I think, did they use Moira's voice in this part where she's in the closet and she's like, Moira wouldn't sit here and take this. She would rebel. And I think it's Moira's actual voice that says, get up, get your ass up, and get off the ground or something.
I don't remember. Maybe.
Yeah, because she's like sitting in they're doing a shot of her facing in the closet. Yeah. And I think it's Moira's voice that says, get your ass up. And so the next is Scrabble, round 2. So we get in there and... she asks, how was your trip? And it's like this totally like, benign conversation of, must have been nice. And you don't know, maybe she's trying to get information because that was part of the thing before was
but who's she going to tell?
But yeah, that's a good point. Oglin's gone, so who did you even tell? And he starts talking about a Mexico trade deal and all these, various egos. And the cutting line I thought was, you have no idea. Like,
and there was just a micro expression that if you caught it was like, dude.
So they're playing, and he has a word challenge, and I was like, the second time I watched it, I was like, really? Really? She's your handmaid who has to have sex with you no matter what, and you're going to challenge a word in Scrabble? And so, like, that just came off as kind of, screw you, right? Like, if you're her, you're like... And I guess he's just trying to play it straight,
just trying to
play it like it really would be. But I was like, come on.
If you were her, though, wouldn't you be really excited to get up and get the dictionary and look at books?
No, you know why? No. And this is me thinking from my perspective. Get your own damn dictionary.
Yeah, I did have a moment of like, why does she have to get the dictionary too? Jesus.
I was like, God, of all the things she has to do.
But then I thought, like, maybe she could steal a book.
And just the way he said it was, go grab me the dictionary. Like, he knew that she had to.
There's no doubt in his mind that she has to do it. Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. So she goes and gets it, and that's when she sees the Latin dictionary, which we're led to know that that's going to lead to her trying to get the Nolite saying translated. So he goes back, and I believe slith was the word that she spelled that he challenged, and so he finds it, and it was an actual word, so she counts it. And they start getting this conversation about what happened to the last handmaid. Because...
Yeah, I thought that was really ballsy of her to be asking about this. Yeah. Like, even given their more personal situation over Scrabble, I was really surprised to see it being brought up that way. It just seemed so risky.
Right, and so she...
ruin the Scrabble.
Because that's the point where he translates it for her, right? And he asks how she heard that.
Yeah, and she says a friend or something.
Right, and that's when you learn that there was a previous Offred, and she asks what happened to her, and you find out that she committed suicide, and that's when the line of, I guess she thought her life was unbearable, and Offred makes says the line of, "You want my life to be bearable," and he said that would be preferred, or something like that. So it is like this. Obviously, he's trying to make it better for her, but none of it's going to be better for her.
Yeah.
It's also better for him if people aren't offing themselves in his house, right? In some level, I get this feeling.
You're not going to get a baby with.
Yeah, he's like, well, we got to make this a little bit better because it just would be so inconvenient if we kept, having these dying handmaids.
Yeah, that's the impression I got as well. And it also made me think, because earlier in the show you see, like, she has to stand on her, like, very, very, very tiptoes and still barely reaches the little cord for the light in the closet. That makes me wonder if the other Offred used the pull string, got the pull string off the light to hang herself in the closet.
I think that's kind of alluded to in the book.
I can't remember.
I think so.
There's something that she knows isn't in the room anymore.
Well, I know when in the book they talk about not being a ceiling fan.
Yeah.
And with that being
the chandelier
really high. So there is the brief flashback to the Red Center, and this is the feet beating scene, which is awful. Which you said happens to Moira because she gets caught in the book, but in this scene, Moira is gone, and Offred has been taken back, and I think the ant that they got tied up and put in the basement is the one who gets the beater.
What is that thing that she's using?
I looked it up.
It's wires?
Not a thing. So in the book, they just say her feet were beaten with steel cables, and so I think that was their way of making a steel cable.
Okay.
It was basically like a handle.
Yeah, I was
almost
trying
like
to
a flogger.
I couldn't tell what it like
it
were
looked,
they stiff? I couldn't tell.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Like
stiff,
they weren't hanging, so they had to be relatively,
stiff
to begin with. So you I think they were like cable or wire, of thick grade that would be able to stand up on their own. And they just beat her feet, and then so then his flashback. That's when they go to that scene first, and then they come back and he's translated it for her, and they have this whole thing like what happened to her. She's dead, and talking about how he would prefer for her life to be better, and so she starts to leverage this against him.
Badly, might we add?
Totally
June
obviously
is a bad actress.
Oh yeah.
In the show, because it was such obvious manipulation.
Yeah, and so she's like, "It'd be a shame if you wouldn't want me to give up like my friend." And she does apologize again. She's like, "I know I let you guys down, and I know this is all my fault." So you can tell that she's leveraging this against him to get him to tell Serena Joy, "Let the handmaid out of the room, please, or things are going to get bad."
Well, in some way, you think that's him feeling like, "You're right. I do have the power to let you do that."
Yeah.
Thank you for acknowledging that I am the one in control of all of this.
Yes, like she is asking for something and also making him feel like it's his benevolence at the same time.
So final scene, she walks out of the house is what we get. So we do flashback to the Red Center, and it's the last scene, and then we see in the Red Center, which is all the other handmaids coming in after Offred's been back. She can't walk because her feet have been beaten, and they're dropping off little pieces of food kind of in solidarity from the lunchroom, which you also know they're probably not supposed to do.
Well, here's where I kind of was like, I don't think that would happen, because they are never unsupervised for a second.
Yeah, that's true.
And so this idea that they would just let them all congregate and kind of share the stolen food, the part of me that wants solidarity is cheering for them, but then the part of me who thinks this is not really consistent.
Right. It's inconsistent in the unreality that we've seen through the show so far. Yeah. I think that's a problem that people have with these kinds of The Walking Dead is constantly being hit from fans on this. That is inconsistent with the reality you have built for this show that is completely unrealistic.
So then we go back, and they're doing the way I read an article today talking about this last scene where all the handmaids are walking down the street, which I think in the era we grew up in, I automatically flashed to the Reservoir Dogs scene where they're all walking down the street in slow motion.
Yep.
The article I read kind of made it, which obviously Reservoir Dogs references this, but the Right Stuff movie where all the astronauts are walking down and it's in slow motion, and that's kind of what this seemed like. They're all coming together in the street, and she does the voiceover of "There's an Offred before me, she helped me find my way out. She's dead, she's alive, she is me, we are handmaids." And so that's the point where they all come together kind of at the intersection of the street, and they leave us with the final line of "Nolite Te Bastardes Carborundorum." I'm going to say it wrong. Carborundorum, bitches.
Yeah, that was the best.
Yeah. Did you like that? I couldn't tell. It kind of toed the line between a little cheesy.
It's cheese.
I think it's cheesy, but it really made me happy just because she seemed so joyful in her thinking of this line. And that made me happy that she was feeling like that.
So that wrapped up the episode. And so, again, a little bit different vibe than the first three. But I thought it was good. Was more of a traditional narrative, not as so much extremes going on as the other three. But I thought it was still, as far as the story goes, thought it was really well done. Any final thoughts on that?
I'm looking forward to seeing where they go, just because I think now episode 4 made it pretty clear that the departure is not extreme, but we're looking at a show that is looking and now announced to have a second season.
Yes, we didn't mention that.
How will they kind of make this a show with longevity rather than one that we know where the story concludes?
Yes, that would be interesting, and we should probably discuss that in future episodes. Where can they even go? Yeah. Ideas for where this could go. But I guess we'll have to see how the rest of the show folds out before us to figure that out. I think that's all we got for this week. We do have our interview with the Feminist Press. We'll have that. And, of course, we will have hardcore lady quotes. But, yeah, it's a good episode. And so we'll see the same guy directs the next one. So we'll see if it's kind of the same vibe. And we'll look forward to the rest of the episodes. So thanks for joining us on this edition of Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And our podcast is available pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, and at our website, allconsumingcontent.com. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Mayday, the Handmaid's Tale podcast proudly presents Hardcore Lady Quotes. Quotes of inspiration, empowerment, and rebellion, chosen, recorded, and read by my kid.
My mother always told me, hide your face, people are looking at you. I would reply, it does not matter. I am also looking at them. Malala Yousafzai.
All right, we are here with Lauren Hook from the Feminist Press, which is based out of New York City at the City University of New York. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's talk a little bit about the Feminist Press, and what can you tell us about it? What is your goal there at the Feminist Press?
Wow. Well, we've been around almost 50 years now. I think technically we're 47 this year. We were founded in 1970, kind of in a bit of a haphazard way. There was lots of community organizing back then, and a lot of women got together and they're like, you know what, we should have a feminist press, a press just for women in the States, and there hadn't been one yet. And our founder, Florence Howe, got together and got the funds and started it herself. And she was a professor, and she realized that a lot of the literature she wanted to teach in classes was out of print. And it wasn't because it wasn't a good book, it was because these were women writers that didn't have the same kind of legacy that a lot of the white male authors were given in terms of what is American canon, right? And so she started bringing these books back into print. There's about 9 people on staff now, and I'm actually trying to expand our list to about 20 books a year.
So, obviously you've been around for a while, so given the, I guess, evolution of the times, what has been the level of resistance you've met from the beginning to even now?
In the 70s, that was sort of a big heyday for capital F feminism, and so there was a lot of support. And then it sort of became a bad word, and people were like, oh, you're those man-haters, right? Like, you're those bra burners. And now you see people like Beyonce, very proudly putting it as a part of their identity, and you can go into like Topshop or Forever 21 and like get a hoodie. And then even I was talking to our director actually recently, Jennifer Baumgardner, and she was saying that years ago when she was at some networking event or something, and so a lot of people were like, you should really change the name. Like, just, advertising that we're feminists is just too much,
Right.
We don't want to scare off the readers.
Being around for so long, has it been important for you guys to kind of not let the trolls and not let the naysayers and the people who call you and tell you to do terrible things rock your boat too much? Just kind of stay.
Don't let the bastards grind us down.
There you go. Look at you. Well done. Well played.
Yeah, honestly, I think you can't be in activism and you can't work in sort of polarizing fields without maybe getting off on it in a way. I think a lot of us here love to argue. We love getting into the issues. We love to debate. And honestly, some of my I'm an editor here, but my favorite parts of this job are like Brooklyn Book Festival, for example, this September, where we table, we get out on the street, and we're selling our wares, and we get to see our fan base, so people who really love us. We also get to see people who come up and they're like, you guys just kill babies. That's what you do.
Oh.
What you're paid to do here. And sort of, opening that up for debate. I think it's a lot of fun, but it also does get exhausting. So, that whole self-care thing that you see going around, you do have to have sort of a nest of love, and we do really support each other here. Well, most of us are under 35. We're kind of like a little family. So we're here, when the bastards get a little too rowdy.
Well, excellent. That's good to hear. Glad you have a good support system going there. Let's cut right into some of the issues since I know our time is limited here. So lately we've had a lot of issues that, to directly address kind of some feminist concerns, you had Bill O'Reilly's firing at Fox News because advertisers finally decided that it was, after 20 sexual harassment allegations, was too much. You have various states trying to restrict access to abortion and other health care. And this week, the Trump administration announced that they would be ending the girls' education program that Michelle Obama had started. So have you guys seen an increase in readership, writing, publishing opportunities, or an overall interest overall because of the current political climate?
The joke in the office, the silver lining, is that maybe this will finally wake people up and really shake people up enough and make people uncomfortable enough to educate themselves, because these types of threats have been going on for a long time, and they're more blatant now. They're worse with Trump, but there's something that, people like certain parts of our population have continued to be threatened and would have been threatened anyway, even if Hillary had been elected. So, but I do feel like that's like the one silver lining, that with a really horrible president, people are finally going to be outraged.
And so how do you feel about the books being an agent of change, and what have you seen from even the things that you're publishing?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our mission statement. We say that all the time, that we do believe that books can shift culture. And actually we just started this literary prize last year for debut writers, women and non-binary writers of color. We published this book by Louise Merriweather, Daddy Was a Number Runner, Harlem Renaissance book, classic. It was one of the first American novels to feature a black girl as the protagonist. And it inspired a whole generation of women writers of color, including more authors on our list currently today, like Bridget M. Davis, or even writers like Jacqueline Lipton. And so we started this prize because, you've seen all the kind of BuzzFeed articles about diversity in publishing. Most people are white, most people are white men in publishing. You go to a networking event in New York and you're like, oh God. So there's a problem. So that's something that we want to address, and we do it with a $5,000 prize, and then we get a publishing contract with us. So we just started that, and we're in our second year. We're really excited to see the submission.
So what current feminist press books that you guys have out right now, or even some that are just from the recent past, what have you seen? Have you seen any that have had a large readership now that we're in this current political climate? And do you see any of them as possibly or hoping to cross over into kind of the mainstream, a la The Handmaid's Tale or some other, popular political tinged novels, they say?
Yeah, I have three ideas. I think first, we have sort of a book it's a trilogy actually, on our backlist that made me really actually want to work at feminist press back in the day, because it's so similar to Handmaid's Tale. It's called the Native Tongue Trilogy, and it's by Suzette Hayden Elgin, and it's a dystopian trilogy, this future where women have lost their rights in 19 property, and they work as linguists, and so they fight the larger patriarchal order through inventing their own language. But then also, we had this great nonfiction book come out earlier this year called the Crunk Feminist Collection, and it's this great work, and it's basically kind of like pop culture criticism essays from these three wonderful academics. They have a blog called the Crunk Feminist Collective, and they're basically, they call themselves ratchet feminists, homegirls who are basically, they love hip-hop and they love that music, but they're academics, they're feminists, and they want to intersect both of their worlds. And they didn't seem to be able to do that in the academy. So they made this blog. It has like 1 million sort of readership. It's great. And so we just published that in January. And we're already reprinting it. It was featured at the Strand, like in their window. Definitely, there's this, everyone's wanting to, wake up, right? So I think it's speaking to the times, especially because I believe Black feminists are at the forefront of feminism today. Women of color are who we should be following. We should have been following them the whole time. So I think they are really where feminism is. So this is one of my favorite books we've published in a really long time. And it's the energy. It's tongue-in-cheek, it's funny, but it's real. And so I really like that one. And then fiction-wise, we have this new imprint called Amethyst Editions, and it's for queer writers, it's for queer work. So far it's been sort of experimental fiction, but we sort of wanted to push past the coming out narrative, because we want to sort of represent queer experience, queer lives beyond that moment. And our first installation of that was this past fall with a novel called Black Wave by Michelle T. And in terms of crossover, more mainstream appeal for a TV show, I feel like that one would be the best contender, because it's very much like 90s nostalgia, throwback in San Francisco, lots of drugs and sex, very funny, but then also it gets pretty meta and it gets pretty kind of futuristic and dystopian because the world is ending. And so it's sort of what everyone is doing in California as the world ends, like, including celebrities.
That sounds fantastic. Because I myself am a huge sci-fi fan as well.
Oh, good to hear! Yay!
Yes, totally. And so that sounds right up my alley. I'm sure there's plenty of other people listening out there that are very excited about that. So we'll put some links to those 3 books on our website and on some social media things as well, so we can have people get more information about that. So let's talk about what's coming up for the future of Feminist Press. What do you guys have coming out, now, and what's going on in the future?
Well, so I'm the editor of our Works in Translation, so I work on a very niche aspect of literature within a niche publisher. And we just came out with a very exciting novel in April from Argentina called August. It's by Serena Joy. And this is actually the first book that made me cry on the train. And in New York, crying in public, I feel like it's like a rite of passage. So this book spoke to me from the beginning, and I'm so excited about it. It's a very, speaking of 90s, it's kind of a millennial voice, a lot of nostalgia, but also just kind of, it's all these coming-of-age stories, and this one's a very backwards coming-of-age. It deals with this young girl in her 20s, and her best friend committed suicide 5 years before, so in their teens. And it's her sort of reconciling that through this memorial service. And it's an incredible book. I'm more of a dark melancholy kind of literature person, so this book's kind of right up my alley. So that just came out, very excited for it. And then in June, we're publishing the over-the-top amazing author Brontez Purnell. He's this punk rock queen icon based in San Francisco. And we're publishing his novel, Since I Laid My Burden Down, which is a very sexy, incredible romp, sort of this guy in San Francisco. He has to go back to his hometown in Alabama. And he goes home and he sort of realizes how far he's come as a gay man, as a black man. And all the stumbling blocks, all the doomed lovers, the difficult, tumultuous relationships with his parents, and sort of a really interesting, funny, sexy, but very heartfelt thought about who deserves love and what kind of love he ends up getting. So that's coming out, as well as we're reissuing this old book of his that has been fallen out of print with the incredible title, Johnny Would You Love Me If My Dick Were Bigger, and that's coming out at the same time. So those 2 books, I cannot wait. We're going to have a bunch of events in New York in June. He's going to be here. He's going to bring his band. It's going to be riotous and wonderful.
Oh, that sounds great. All right, well, I know we got to run here, so I appreciate you joining us again today on Mayday, The Handmaid's Tale podcast. Once again, this is Lauren Hook with the Feminist Press out of the City University of New York.
It's been a pleasure, Justin. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for listening to this edition of Mayday, The Handmaid's Tale podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Handmaid Podcast. You can find us on Instagram as well, and on Facebook. On behalf of everyone here at the show, thanks, and we'll see you next week.